thank you again for honoring our invitation. This opening session is now open. It consists of a welcome from the Executive Director of Trade and Industrial Policy Strategies, Saul Levin, and Prof. Fiona Tregenna, who is Professor in Economics at the University of Johannesburg, who also holds the DST NRF South African Research and Industrial Development at SARChI. These two key inputs will frame why we are here today in line with the theme which is, as you all know, towards a just transition, the role of industrial policy. And then this will be followed by an address, a keynote address by the Director General of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, who will be delivering a keynote on behalf of Minister Creasy, who could not be with us here today. Thank you, DG, for honoring our invitation last minute. So again, thank you all for being here. My name is Baba-Tamana. I am a senior economist at TIPS. So I hand over to Saul to provide the context and welcome for the forum 2022. Thanks, Saul.
Morning, everyone. DG Tshabalala, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Fiona Tregenna, or Professor Tregenna, thank you for joining us and being a partner to this event. Colleagues, friends, there's a lot of people who I recognize who I haven't seen in a while in person, so it's fantastic to have that and to see people as people. I'm also a real person. People would have seen me in the past as a screen name, or I'm not a bot, I'm a real person. And it's great to be here and have an in-person event. Last year, we held our event as a virtual event. When we planned it last year, we thought, okay, let's see how it goes. We hit a wave of COVID back then, and it meant we quickly pivoted and ran it as a virtual event. This year, we're very fortunate that COVID has allowed, the COVID decline and the lower risk has allowed us to have a hybrid event. I'm hoping that by next year, we'll be back to the 200 odd people that we had pre-COVID, packing into the DVSA forum. Baba's looking at me scared. but these things are nice to have. It's as I often say, it's often the networking that happens in the tea breaks and the discussions that's really useful. And sorry to the online people that you won't be able to be part of that. But we hope that you all benefit from both formats and interactions. Doing a hybrid event is different. I think we had about 300 people registering for the online portion. So welcome to all the online attendees. People will dip in and out to the sessions that they want to join in on. And we hope that we'll also be able to see their comments and questions as we go through the event. Those people who aren't, we have a lower COVID risk, but if you are feeling uncomfortable, you can wear your mask. I have brought mine in case, but don't feel that you're going to be the only one wearing it, or there's only going to be a few. If you are feeling in any way uncomfortable, please wear your mask. We have, in terms of the venue layouts, tried to keep things a bit separate, and it is nice and airy, but please feel free to wear your mask. Those of you who are new to this event and haven't been to one of the TIPS forums before, we've been running these for the last 25 years, each year with a different theme. And we did miss a couple of years along the way, but we have tried to maintain the consistency of the TIPS forum for almost a decade now. And we find that these events, they add value. We have interesting policy debates. There's good discussion that happens. There's new insights that come through, and it's getting insights into a range of different industrial policy issues and how they link to what's going on in the economy. We try to keep it relevant and focused on what's happening that's important now in terms of our discussion. So we've, in terms of the current context out there. Last year we did post-COVID reconstruction, which was very topical and important at that point. This year, the just transition has really taken off. It's become one of the key issues that all of us need to be thinking about. More on that shortly. This year, TIPS turned 25. We had a party a couple of weeks ago. It was actually a little bit delayed. 25 for a whole year. So we thought, let's wait for when we can safely have an in-person event. So we held our party a couple of weeks ago. At that event, we just celebrated an important milestone as an institution that's been thinking about these industrial development, industrial policy issues in different ways and shapes for quarter of a century. And we hope that we continue to have these kind of events and these kind of engagements going forward. And thank you to the support from everyone who's come year after year. I recognize someone from when I was still in government going to a TIPS forum. And I think, Imran, you were there in Stellenbosch in, when was that? 2000? No, yeah, 1990. I don't know when it was, but way back then. And yeah, so it's been nice to see people over the years. And as we've all moved organizations and changed our careers and done different things, it's been great to keep contact and keep in touch with some of the research that's important, that shapes where we're going. We produced a small publication. Thank you to the team that worked on that, in particular Renee, who's here. Thank you, Renee. There's a couple of copies, hard copies outside in the foyer with some of our other publications. We also have it available online if people want to just browse through, see faces and names that you may or may not recognize, and also just a bit of an understanding of where TIPS as an institution has come from. It takes us through the good times, takes us through some of the rough times, but we have continued on that path. And you know, in current years, we have been thriving and able to continue with these kind of events and the other research that we've been doing with a lot of support from our research partners. This year, our theme of Towards a Just Transition, the role of industrial policy, is a topic that's been at the front and center of TIPS's own work for the past 3 years, maybe slightly longer. We did, a few years ago, we did a very comprehensive set of studies on the sector jobs resilience plans and the National Employment Vulnerability Assessment. And that work then took us to a much broader set of research outputs, community engagements, dialogues. We did a whole bunch of work for the Presidential Climate Commission, and that's partly why I'm slightly grayer than I was because of that project, but it was really good. And now we've even have a video. We'll be seeing a snippet of it later this morning. And you know, I really enjoyed that video. We'll just see a snippet, but it's available online, and it really captures some of the key messaging and issues faced by communities and in the just transition. And I do recommend watching that in full, but we'll hear more about that later. For us, the just transition work fits well with our approach to inclusive and sustainable industrial development. I want to thank the TIPS colleagues who will be presenting their work over the next 2 days and participating in the discussion in various ways. We've done a lot, and we're only presenting some of our work, but we've had multiple online discussions and various papers out. So we have that all available on our website. And from what I've seen of the program, we have excellent papers that are going to be presented at this conference. So I encourage people to stay throughout, support colleagues, and you know, just engage in some of the debates. It's a complex issue. And we were talking this morning, we don't quite understand how complex all of these things are. And that's why the research is so important. And the policy discussions are so important, because it's an area of work that's evolving, it's developing, and it really does need a lot of debates and new insights coming into it. And being probably one of the most critical issues that's confronting us at the moment. The theme of the forum tackles the intersection between the just transition and industrial policy. and it looks at some of the issues. It takes the climate crisis as something that's happening. It's taking place on a daily basis. We see it in our own country. We see it in other countries. What's going on globally around the impact of the climate crisis, and we're taking that as something that's given, something that gets worse, and something that needs to that requires action to change. And it's those actions that we need to start thinking about. And as we move rapidly, and the move does need to happen rapidly, to a more sustainable approach to economic development, it's not a luxury, but it's an imperative that we get these things right. And when we understand what's happening around the moves to address the climate crisis, we can see the economic impacts. And as we're exploring and as we're going deeper, we can say, okay, these are not just, a simple decision. I was saying earlier, a simple decision to remove the 100 megawatt cap. We don't know the implications on that. What does it mean for energy generation? What does it mean for how we think about pricing of electricity? What does it mean for the type of industry we have in this economy? And these are some of the discussions that we're going to be having over the next 2 days as we start thinking around all of the implications of these big decisions that are made. And what does it mean for reducing emissions? And how do we think about all of what needs to happen? We increasingly seeing, though, that the move to a low carbon future can come with economic opportunities and job creation. And a lot of the work that's being done at the moment is trying to better understand the need for that, but also that it has to actually be conscious decisions that are taken in order to take us down that road, that it doesn't just happen that these opportunities are created, that we can just sit back and relax. There needs to be active work on that. And it does also mean that we need to understand the challenges. We need to make sure that we take steps to have an economic development plan that is both inclusive and sustainable as we're going down this path of reducing our carbon emissions and responding to the climate crisis. The role of research and policy engagement is much needed, particularly on an area of work that is relatively new, but is so critical to our future. As we go down this path, we're seeing new technologies are emerging, and we're seeing that the changes are bringing about the need for new technologies. And there's, I suppose, a lot that's going to happen around research and development to get our heads around what does it mean for smaller plants to be now operating their own electricity, becoming an electricity company, as well as making the goods that they make, or producing whatever that it is that they produce? Or does it mean that we become less energy intensive and have a different future around services or other value adding industries that are out there? Although apparently cryptocurrencies are very energy intensive. So some of these other, value adding services, if that is value adding, is not necessarily energy light or carbon, is more energy intensive. So we also need to think about some of the pathways that don't necessarily take us to a low carbon future, and what are the implications of these things. It also means that we need to be thinking about different and more appropriate infrastructure. As we seeing what's happening with the climate crisis, we need to be thinking about resilience. We need to be thinking about how do we cope in the event of climate crisis, and what does that mean for the just transition? And what does it mean for diversification of our economy and moving into areas of industry that are low carbon? I don't think we understand the full impact of our response to the climate crisis, and it's going to cut across multiple industries. It's going to impact on our energy systems, our transport systems. It's going to impact on who we trade with, how we trade, the types of products that are traded. It's going to impact on our agriculture, how we think about the resources that we use, and that requires a lot of thinking and engagement around better understanding and research around how we tackle these things. A just transition approach means that we need to ensure that we don't leave people behind and in a worse position, with so many in our country who don't have the resources to adapt and cope with what's coming. Not having a clear response and a just transition approach means that that the burden will be felt disproportionately by workers, by small businesses and their communities, and requires action to make sure that that doesn't happen. The themes and the panel discussions for this year are outlined in our program. I think we all have a copy of the program on the desks, and they will focus on different aspects of the just transition and industrial policy. It's a good set of papers. I'm looking forward to the discussions, and as people will see, we've moved back into a format of parallel sessions that are taking place. So some are plenary, some are parallel, and I'm sure we'll be directed to the right venues as we go through the day. We've had people saying, but I want to be in all of the sessions. You can view them online. The hybrid approach means that we will have everything available online and recorded so that we can visit and listen to the sessions that we weren't able to join in on. The type of papers and discussions that we're having, I think will make a contribution. It's going to contribute to developing, enhancing our thinking. It's going to identify new research areas, what areas are still unexplored that need to be discussed and taken forward. And hopefully it all leads to an improved policy making space and a more effective just transition. I just want to acknowledge the people who've made this conference possible. It takes a huge effort to hold events such as this, getting the call for papers out, getting the papers in, shortlisting, making sure that we have a coherent program. So I want to thank the internal team, in particular Baba, our program director from this morning, who's successfully coordinated the conference this year with the support of our team who are outside, Daphne and Roselle, as well as Lesejo, who I'm hoping is inside and has also been doing some work in this space. And they've worked extremely hard to ensure a very successful conference. So thank you very much. Our partners from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development based at UJ, thank you. And we recognize how important these partners are, not only with the resources that they bring, but the knowledge and the contribution to steering committees and other ways that we're engaging with them to make this event successful. We've also received a contribution from UK Pact towards some of the costs of this event, and I want to acknowledge their support. We also have an RT team here. Thank you, RT team. Let's hope the hybrid format works. It's a new territory for us to run a conference in this way, and we hope that it all goes smoothly, and you'll bear with us if there are any hiccups, but hopefully all works out well. And then lastly, just to thank the support that I get from our board of directors. Some of them aren't able to join us. They've had other things scheduled. Some will join us virtually, some will be here in person, but it's great to have a supportive board who enables us to get these kind of programs happening and supported. The hybrid format means that we have a much broader audience from across the world. So we hope that the feedback will come through and that they're able to still send their messages or have their own chat. And able to get some of the experience of being at a hybrid event. We will, as I said, be loading the papers onto the TIPS website. We'll have the PowerPoints and the recorded sessions. So yeah, thank you to everyone. The different range of people who are here today always is interesting for me. We've got government officials, we've got researchers and academics, we've got people from state-owned companies, we've got international organizations who represented, industry association, private sector participants. So it's a nice mix of people. So I encourage you to chat to random people during the breaks and see where they're coming from and what their views are. I hope we have lots of good discussion. I think there's always good discussion, and I'm looking forward to that continuing. And I hope that you enjoy it and have a great 2 days. I'm now going to hand over to Fiona, or are you coming back? Okay, Fiona, okay, you'll come back. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Just a quick one before Fiona's input. I see WhatsApps from colleagues. I got the Wi-Fi password wrong. It's IT 2022, not 2020. Obviously the trauma of COVID. And I'll hand over, as Fiona has been introduced as a key partner to the TIPS Forum for many, many years. Fiona is also, I would say, a key actor in this community of practice around industrial policy. So I hand over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Baba. Thanks, Saul. Greetings, DG, and to everybody here and participating online. As South African Research Chair in Industrial Development, it's really great to again be partnering in the TIPS Annual Forum. And after the past 2 years of doing it online, it's really exciting this year, I think, to be at least in a hybrid format. And just before the session opened this morning, already having the opportunity to interact with some colleagues, in some cases that we haven't met in person for the past 2.5 years. The TIPS Annual Forum has always played a really important role in terms of bringing to the fore research broadly around the theme of trade and industrial development, but research which is topical, impactful, relevant to real policy issues in South Africa, on the continent more broadly, and internationally. And I think it's being animated in different years by themes, looking at the last few years, finance, regional development, this year the just transition and so on, which has allowed a more in-depth look at particular topics within this broad area of industrial development. And I mean, looking around the room, I can see people like SARChI, for example, that have been attending the TIPS Annual Forum. I can remember in the late 90s. I guess I'm exposing how old we are here. But it's always been a good opportunity, as Saul said, as well, for even outside of the formal presentation of papers, for sharing insights, ideas, and so on, in the way that this TIPS Annual Forum brings together colleagues who are interested in the issues, but from academia, from research institutes, NGOs, government, trade unions, the media, and so on, in a way that many of the conferences that we attend are unable to do. Let me just say a couple of words briefly around SARChI Industrial Development, South African Research Chair in Industrial Development. We're based at UJ, and are working very broadly in the overall theme of industrial development. Within that, a range of issues ranging from innovation and technological upgrading, green industrialization, industrial policy, deindustrialization, and so on. And we're running various activities, including research, both through organized research projects and running primary surveys and so on, as well as, I guess the second area being the training and capacity building, some of this at the university, some of it more broadly, through courses, some with policymakers, some with students, including across the continent. And I think a particular focus of our activities within that is building research and scholarship within this field amongst young and emerging researchers across the African continent. And then the third area of our work is around public and policy engagement. Coming to the theme of this year's event, I think it's a particularly topical and important one, because gone are the days, fortunately, gone are the days where we could talk about industrialization and industrial policy without talking about the environmental aspects of it. And it's particularly important because industrialization is obviously has been one of the contributors internationally to climate change. And yet, as recently as I would say maybe about 10 years ago, within this broad area of industrial development, I think it's fair to say that the majority of people, myself included, weren't seeing this really as core to this field. We kind of saw the climate change and the environmental, the green aspects as, yes, it's important, but and it's good that some people are working on that, but it wasn't really integrated fundamentally within this area of industrialization and industrial policy. And I think it's now widely recognized and accepted that the environmental aspects have to be fundamentally factored in the research and policy levels to how we industrialize. And this presents, I guess, a particular issue for late industrializers and late industrializers, as some of the developing countries which are now trying to catch up with industrialization have been referred to. Because on the one hand, there's the imperative of structural change, of industrialization, of catching up. Yet it's in the context of the need to mitigate emissions and to industrialize in a sustainable way. And of course, these dual imperatives are something which the advanced economies didn't have to grapple with in their own periods of industrialization over the past couple of 100 years. They were able to industrialize largely without regard to the environmental impact of that. And we see the legacy of that in the climate change which is being experienced today. Yet for late industrializers, it's not an option just to say, well, it's not our problem. So it certainly complicates the process of industrialization. But this imperative of industrializing, yet in a sustainable way. I think it also does open opportunities for late industrializers to get into these areas where there are opportunities for building up capabilities and for job creation and so on, linked to the green industrialization agenda. So this set of issues around sustainable industrialization, green industrial policy, the just transition is really crucial in, I think, bringing together also the communities of kind of industrial policy people, just transition people, and so on, which shouldn't be these separate communities, but really need to be integrated at the research level and at the policy level. And really as well to give content to this concept of the just transition, which I think is sometimes becomes a bit of a buzzword. Nobody would argue against it or say we don't need a just transition, or no one would say no, an unjust transition is okay. But obviously people have got different concepts of what that means. And so it's really about fleshing that out. What does a just transition truly mean at the national level, where different communities are bearing the costs of the green transition, as well as at the international level between countries. So to find pathways for developing countries and for regions, even within South Africa and across the continent, to industrialize, but to do so in a sustainable way. And looking at the various papers that will be presented and debated over the next day and a half, I see really exciting research that is coming to these crucial issues from different angles. So really looking forward to constructive engagements and to learning from the presentations over the next day and a half. Thank you.
Thanks to Fiona as well as Saul for providing succinctly broad framing of what we are grappling with over the next day and a half, which in itself is rather complicated, as Fiona refers to. Our next speaker is DG Nomfundo Tshabalala, who was or began her career in the Swaziland government's Department of Finance, where she focused on development finance and the implementation and monitoring of internationally funded projects. In 2000, in the year 2000, DG joined the Gauteng provincial government, working for the Gauteng Department of Finance and Economic Affairs as a chief director, and was appointed head of the provincial treasury in 2006. joining officially in 2021 the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. Again, thank you for joining us, DG, at last minute. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning to everyone present here. As already introduced, my name is Nomfundo Tshabalala, the Director General of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. I also would like to just introduce two of my colleagues that are joining me today. In the department. They come within the department from a branch, climate change and air quality. I am joined by the Acting Deputy Director General, Mr. Chloe Ramaru. You just can wave to everyone present here. And also the Chief Director within that same branch, Mr. Jongikaya Witi. They are with me and as the key experts, and possibly if during tea, given that we are not going to be with you after that, any other issues that you may just want to interact with them in terms of where we are as a department in relation to the work that we are doing around climate change and also issues of air quality. And of course, I think the focus today is around the just transition. So good morning and thank you very much for the invite. And as already highlighted, Minister is not able to join this morning due to other commitments. Let me first acknowledge the esteemed officials. I think I'm told that there's officials from government. Also, we have industry present here, NGOs, etc., both here and also online. Also acknowledging collaborating partners that have been highlighted here, and the organizers of TIPS 2022 Forum, our enabled researchers and participants of TIPS 2022 Forum. It is an honor for me and the department to be invited to this very important TIPS 2022 Annual Forum, which this year is discussing the important issues of the just transition in achieving low carbon and development of pathway towards also dealing with issues of climate resilient and sustainable society, which is underpinned by our National Development Goal Vision 2030. As already also highlighted and alluded to, this year's theme of this 2022 Forum is towards a just transition, and particularly around the role of the industry policy. So this theme highlights the importance of streaming and also mainly streamlining and aligning South Africa's industrial policies towards a shared vision of achieving a net zero carbon emission by 2050, which is our target as a country. And this goal must, however, not distract from the importance of us as a country working towards eradicating poverty through ensuring that we have an economy that creates jobs, also initiatives that creates jobs, and have sound economic development and redressing inequalities that are there in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, the TIPS Forum is happening at a crucial point in our stakeholder debate about consolidating our shared vision on what type of a just transition would be relevant within the South African context. I am pleased to note that following a rigorous national consultation process in 2021, we are now moving towards a collective understanding as a nation on how the just transition in South Africa should look like. But I think there's a very critical point. We need to take everyone along. There would have been discussions and consultation through the Presidential Climate Commission and various communities to the best of our ability. Even the old men, young lady, women, and every population in the deepest of our rural areas, also with the urban area. At some point, we must be moving in the same direction in as far as the just transition intervention. I would like to commend the TIPS team, the various institutions and organizations, as well as individual researchers for pioneering the groundbreaking research that has informed our decisions and created a greater understanding on what a just transition means for our country's people, especially in terms of recognizing the plight of workers, the youth. Currently, we're having a serious youth unemployment, and also our vulnerable communities out there. Thus, their adoption of our motto that the transition should leave no one behind. So our motto, as we are pursuing the just transition, we are very clear that this transition should leave no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, the Presidential Climate Commission, which we, in government, we also, we use a lot of acronyms. We call it the PCC. It has, since its inception in the year 2020, to oversee the development of a just transition framework and its associated decarbonization pathways, been steadily building a stakeholder inclusive mechanism for a dialogue on just transition mechanism for the country. In this regard, there has been commendable progress. In 2021, the PCC worked and focused on 3 urgent and immediate priorities, where mainly in terms of strengthening South Africa's 2030 climate targets. We have targets that we have in terms of the national determination, the NDCs that we have, which we have to report to the UNFCCC in as far as issues of dealing with the climate change challenge. So they are focusing, that is one of the priorities in terms of strengthening those climate targets, but also developing a framework to guide a just and equitable transition, and also building a social compact to support this transition. So those have been what has been occupying the Presidential Climate Commission, focusing on those three areas. In May 2022, the PCC multi-stakeholder conference, which was held in Midrand on a just transition in South Africa, concluded the national consultative process and provided an opportunity for all social partners to consolidate a shared vision on priorities for our development plan mandate. Only last month, which ended obviously yesterday, July, the President, Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, said at the launch of the Just Transition Framework that the most important recommendation arising from the plan is the call for government to ensure that the Just Transition is mainstreamed and integrated in the various government planning processes, including the medium-term strategic framework, also the various individual plans that department implement in as far as their performance, the APPs, but also critical is around ensuring that it is indeed resourced so that then they can be in a position to then implement the various initiatives as government. The framework sets out the vision, and obviously I'm assuming that you would have had engaged in some of these forums. It is still going through processes of approval, having been handed over to the president. But I would want to believe that everyone else then will have a copy of that framework, so that then you begin to familiarize yourself with what, through the consultative process, the PCC is planning to do, but obviously working very closely with the key stakeholders. So this framework sets out a vision. It touches on issues of key principles and planning elements and policy measures that require to achieve a successful transition to a just society, and also aim to bring a coherence and coordination to planning. It also recognizes the importance of skills development, economic diversification, and already highlighted, if we are then to transition into this just transition, we need to be investing in quite a number of infrastructure and so on and so forth. It also recognized the importance of social support and governance and finance mechanism required to make a low carbon economy a reality. It advocates for a massive expansion of renewable energy, also battery storage, new energy vehicle, green minerals, and the hydrogen economy. It also calls for the creation of long-term decent work that mitigates losses from the decline in fossil fuel usage. In education, one of the immediate implications is going to be around reskilling and upskilling the workforce. I think there's always the fear out there to say that this transition must not make the unemployment even worse. So by reskilling and upskilling the workforce, that should be done so that they can adapt to new technologies, which will ensure that decent livelihoods of vulnerable communities are safeguarded. The next step now is to develop an action plan following this framework, and this will ensure that that framework is implemented, and it will require a sustainable finance to succeed and also to be properly implemented. This will mean significant climate resource mobilization, both from the public and also private resources, including climate financial aid. A presidential climate finance task team, which is headed by Mr. Daniel Minele, is currently working tirelessly and in ensuring that we have full details, we understand the full details of an offer by the developed countries to mobilize about it's 8.5 billion, which was highlighted and committed in the past COP26, translating to about 131 billion. And that is over the next 3 to 5 years. And this is to support the implementation of the revised NDCs, which is the climate targets that we have committed to, and also to begin our just transition. In addition, we are collaborating with partners as government, such as the government of Germany through GIZ, on a project to pilot implementation of sector job resilient plans with particular focus on Mpumalanga, knowing very well that there are a number of challenges when you look at the whole country, where fossil fuel, the power stations mainly concentrated in that province, we have been focusing in that province, in Mpumalanga. And the aim of this work, which we are partnering on with GIZ, is to ensure that the resulting negative economic or the socio-economic impact, which potentially burdens our people, are not shifted onto vulnerable people and communities. The vulnerable value chain identified in the National Employment Vulnerability Assessment were mainly on coal, metals, and petroleum-based transport, tourism, and agriculture value chain. And the assessment provided a detailed analysis of their capacity, of the vulnerable communities, workers, and also businesses to adjust to climate change related impact. And for the development of these resilient plans, which we are working tirelessly with our partners, it also indicated areas where developments warrants a programmatic response and the need of vulnerable groups as they seek a viable adjustment. It is noteworthy that it is worth noting, that TIPS leads a development of this National Employment Vulnerability Assessment and the sector job resilient plans, the two pieces of work that have helped to shape a just transition program in the country. Importantly, the just transition framework, which I've alluded to earlier, will be an anchor to all sector levels, frameworks and strategies, and other sector level policies, such as industrial policy, themed in this year's forum, which will need to be aligned to the overarching just transition framework. Ladies and gentlemen, it's critical for us to address the transition risk in adapting and also mitigating climate change, climate strategies, policies and investment, which will be required by the country South Africa to make a significant contribution to the ambitious target of carbon net zero by mid-century, which is 2050. Among the measures required for this would have to be implemented at all levels of government and private sector, while ensuring growth of South Africa is internationally competitive. We will also need to enhance our green economy technologies uptake, while ensuring that skills in various sectors are indeed upskilled. An area that also warrants attention is that all role players, including industrial sector and financial regulators, they need to examine the extent to which financial systems and our industries are exposed to the emerging transition risk. And this will assist in informed decision-making and to ensure that our industry attain scaled up market readiness so that we minimize the negative impact of associated transition risk. Other transition risk associated with social aspects such as job losses, as I already indicated, in the carbon intensive sectors are also very critical. This will require upscaling of energy renewal sources while ensuring that livelihood opportunities are indeed created. And as I emphasized, we need not leave others behind. We all need to be traveling this journey together, especially all those vulnerable communities. And it is therefore, as I conclude, my fervent hope that this conference will create further motivation for the movement into the just transition space. In conclusion, I would like to pledge our continued support for your work and wish you a very successful deliberation. And thank you very much for the invite. Thank you, Program Director. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. That concludes the opening session for today.